The operational landscape of the Ukraine conflict, particularly as of mid-December 2025, appears to be defined by simultaneous breakthroughs and counterstrokes, creating what General Alexander Syrskyi, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, recently described as an unprecedented tempo of engagement, sometimes reaching as many as 300 combat clashes per day, the highest figure since the conflict's inception.
This immense pressure suggests Moscow is leveraging significant numerical superiority, maintaining troop levels that hover around 710,000, even while sustaining heavy daily casualties, a factor that might constrain their ability to significantly increase total force numbers despite active recruitment campaigns.
The core narrative emerging from the front lines highlights severe tactical victories for Russian forces in key strategic hubs, coupled with an aggressive and seemingly coordinated Ukrainian response targeting crucial Russian deep logistics and infrastructure, indicating a dangerous escalation on multiple fronts. One of the most alarming developments for Kyiv comes from the Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions, where Russian forces are reported to have achieved significant penetration.
In Mirnograd, reports from mapping groups suggest that the final major Ukrainian defensive line has been breached, allowing RFAV to consolidate control over central residential areas, isolating pockets of Ukrainian defenders within apartment complexes in the Svetly district. It is likely that the encirclement efforts, which have reportedly led to instances of Ukrainian soldiers attempting unsuccessful breakouts via motorcycles, are tightening considerably, presenting a severe humanitarian and tactical challenge for the remaining defenders.
Similarly, the situation in Zaporizhia, specifically around Huliaipole, appears increasingly critical. RV Voenkour reports confirm a powerful Russian offensive penetrating Ukrainian defenses in this vital stronghold. RAFF units are reportedly pushing into the residential area from the north and intensifying pressure from the east, including successfully crossing the Gaichu River.
The scale of the advance in recent days is significant, estimated to cover up to 12 square kilometers, with Moscow forces pushing deep into the center, securing positions near key intersections and educational facilities. Military analysts suggest that should Huliaipole fall, the consequences could be catastrophic, potentially triggering a domino effect similar to the earlier loss of Vuhledar, compounding the strain on the southern front.
Adding further complexity to the eastern crisis is the situation around Seversk in the Donetsk region. Reports circulating through channels closely tied to Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, such as Deep State, indicate that Seversk is now almost entirely compromised.
RAFAF capitalized on earlier gains of tactical high ground north of the city, effectively isolating the low-lying settlement and making logistics for the 54th and 10th Ukrainian brigades stationed there incredibly difficult. While contact lines are cautiously drawn along the Bakhmutka River, suggesting AFU retains some presence in the smaller western section, there are highly pessimistic scenarios suggesting RAFAF control now encompasses the entire administrative boundary.
Unconfirmed video footage reportedly shows Russian soldiers moving with striking confidence inside the city, sometimes without defensive gear, further underscoring the severity of the loss. Sources within the Kyiv command explicitly state that recapturing the lost territory would necessitate the immediate deployment of prepared reserves, an action whose feasibility remains contingent on General Syrskyi's strategic calculations regarding force availability across the sprawling front line.
However, the narrative of unilateral Russian success is heavily complicated by robust Ukrainian counteractions and strategic strikes. In a demonstration of deep strike capability, the early hours of December 14th saw UAV attacks reportedly launched by Ukraine against crucial Russian energy infrastructure.
Ukrainska Pravda detailed strikes targeting an oil storage facility in Uryupinsk, Volgograd Oblast, along with unconfirmed social media reports of attacks on oil refineries in Yaroslavl and Krasnodar Krai and a power plant in Smolensk Oblast. The Volgograd governor, Andrei Bocharov, confirmed the UAV debris caused a fire at the oil depot, necessitating the evacuation of adjacent residences.
These strikes signal Kyiv's continued commitment to degrading Russian logistical capacity and projecting military pressure deep within Russian territory,
seeking to maintain a crucial counterbalance to the ground troop advances. Furthermore, Kyiv has mounted fierce counteroffensives in the northern Kupiansk direction, where the situation appears significantly more volatile and advantageous for Ukrainian forces. Reports suggest intense fighting on both sides of the Oskil River. West of the river, Ukrainian forces are actively pushing back RAFF units, having regained positions around Lavadna and Dmitrievska streets. Critically, AFU advances towards the north appear to have solidified positions along Micharina and Mechnikova streets, successfully cutting off the main Russian ground supply route into the western half of the city.
AFU's success in the north has reportedly forced remaining Russian units in the northwestern sectors to retreat toward the city center, leading to rapid Ukrainian clearing of residential areas and industrial zones, including the near-total recapture of Rodkivka village and consolidation of territory around Kindrashivka further north. Conversely, Russian forces have also achieved localized success on the eastern bank of the Oskil in the Kupiansk sector.
Intense Russian raids over the past week successfully pushed AFU out of remaining industrial buildings on the eastern outskirts, leading to the reported occupation of the majority of Kucherivka and forcing a Ukrainian withdrawal from Sinkivka, officially ending the protracted nearly 2.5-year battle for that village. This dynamic fluctuation highlights the extreme cost of the fighting, with recent data suggesting AFU regained 23 square kilometers in the Kupiansk area, slightly more than the 9.97 square kilometers gained by RAFF, demonstrating a highly fluid and costly operational environment for both combatants. Finally, the conflict has witnessed a worrying escalation at sea, potentially affecting vital supply corridors. Military Summary reported the first instance since the beginning of the special military operation wherein Russia deliberately struck a commercial vessel in the Odessa port area. Although specific cargo details are disputed, sources indicate the ship was completely destroyed and was reportedly transporting weaponry. This maritime strike was immediately followed by a large-scale attack on energy infrastructure targets in the Odessa region, an action that reportedly plunged the entire city into darkness. This suggests that RAFF is significantly increasing the level of risk associated with maritime transport into Ukraine's Black Sea ports, possibly attempting to cripple crucial import avenues. The overall picture is one of profound strategic jeopardy for Ukraine in the east and south, balanced by persistent and operationally effective counterpressure directed at crippling Russian logistics and holding ground in the north.
It is likely that the coming weeks will determine whether the recent Russian breakthroughs translate into deeper strategic success, or whether Kyiv's deep strike and localized counteroffensive tactics can successfully halt or reverse the momentum. The shifting momentum of this conflict is currently most dramatically illustrated in the Donetsk region, where Russian forces appear to have capitalized on sustained pressure around Mirnograd, executing a decisive maneuver that may portend the complete fall of the city. According to reports compiled by AMK Mapping, Russian forward assault groups continue the arduous process of encirclement, having successfully breached what is described as the final major defense line held by Ukrainian forces within the city limits. Visual evidence that has surfaced on social media platforms strongly suggests the severity of the situation for the defending units, showing isolated groups of Ukrainian soldiers surrendering, while desperate, often individual attempts to break the siege, such as those utilizing motorcycles, have reportedly been unsuccessful and captured on video, underscoring the completeness of the operational trap. Tactically, the Russian advance has been methodical and focused on key urban nodes. In the center, RFAF elements have progressed deep into the northern sector of the Zapadny district and have since pushed into the high-rise buildings of the 40th quarter, quickly solidifying control there before beginning fighting for the adjacent three-story structures.
Critically, flanking maneuvers have been deployed, with groups circling the 40th quarter from the west through low-rise residential areas, seeking to establish contact with other assault teams on the city's northwestern streets. This coordinated action is intended to fracture the internal defensive posture. Further exacerbating the critical situation, on the northeastern side of Mirnograd, Russian troops reportedly achieved a significant breakthrough towards the Tarakan area, securing garage cooperatives and successfully linking up with existing assault groups positioned in the 523 district, who had previously cleared high-rise buildings and the fire station.
The consequence of these linked advances has been the isolation of perhaps dozens of Ukrainian soldiers, now trapped within several apartment complexes in the Svetly district, cut off from the primary defensive perimeter. Concurrently, RAFF units are reported to have entered the city center from the south, beginning the clearing operations of the initial three-story structures, while simultaneously fortifying positions in the forested areas and field fortifications immediately east of Mirnograd.
These localized but continuous advances, including the expansion from the 8th district towards the paintball playground in the eastern center and the consolidation near the old Novator mine in the northwest, have cumulatively tilted nearly 10 square kilometers of territory toward the Russian side, suggesting that the organized defense of Mirnograd is rapidly collapsing.
The situation developing in Mirnograd is compounded by equally alarming reports emerging from the Zaporizhia front, particularly around Huliaipol, where the Russian army has achieved what analysts describe as a profound penetration of Ukrainian defense lines. RV Voyenkour, a prominent military source, detailed intense fighting as RAFF pushed vigorously from the north into residential areas and applied substantial pressure from the east, including advancing across the Gaichor River.
This offensive momentum has reportedly resulted in a territorial gain of approximately 12 square kilometers in recent days. Moscow's forces are described as moving towards the center from the east and northeast, securing positions near the intersection of Tsvetonyaka and Mira streets, and establishing a foothold in the northeastern suburbs covering 1.15 square kilometers.
AMK mapping further elaborated on the gravity of the Huliaipol breakthrough, noting that after a week of intense combat, the Russians have degraded key defenses on the northeastern edge of the city, reaching the Gaichor River, and subsequently expanding into the northwestern and southeastern sectors.
By utilizing a destroyed road bridge, RFAFAF units appear to have established a significant presence in the city center, taking the courthouse, an auto repair shop, and advancing toward the municipal hospital complex. If these deep penetrations hold, observers have cautioned that Huliaipol could experience a scenario akin to the protracted and ultimately devastating fall of Vuhledar, triggering a potential domino effect across the eastern flank of the Zaporizhia front.
This concentrated pressure, from Mirnograd to Huliaipol, speaks to General Oleksandr Syrski's recent grim assessment, where he noted that the number of daily engagements has reached an unprecedented 300, the highest figure since the conflict began, illustrating that the entire front line is currently subjected to grinding, high-intensity offensive operations.
This relentless operational tempo represents a fundamental challenge to Kyiv's ability to sustain defensive depth, particularly when considering the precarious situation in other theaters, such as Seversk. Reports citing Deep State, a channel often linked to Ukraine's defense intelligence, have confirmed that Seversk is now almost entirely lost.
Exploiting heavy fog and seizing strategic high ground north of the city in preceding weeks, RAFAF forces have made holding the low-lying urban areas nearly impossible for the armed forces of Ukraine. Sources within Kiev's command structure reportedly admit that the enemy is present throughout the city, excluding the area beyond the Bakhmutka River, with logistics becoming immensely difficult.
The necessity of deploying reserves to address the crises at Mirnograd, Huliaipol, and Seversk concurrently places Kiev's strategic planning under extreme duress. However, to maintain an objective perspective, it is necessary to highlight areas where Ukrainian forces are demonstrably retaining initiative and achieving success, most notably around Kupiansk. The situation on the Kupiansk axis remains intensely volatile, acting as a crucial counterpoint to the prevailing narrative of Russian gains. Both sides are engaged in active maneuvers on both sides of the Oskil River. On the southwestern side, Ukrainian counterattacks have been fierce, regaining ground along Lavadna and Dmitrievska Straits, infiltrating apartment complexes, and making efforts to encircle remaining Russian units in northern high-rise buildings.
Ukrainian forces have also pushed aggressively west of the railway line toward the highway and further east into the city center, reaching the furniture factory and the stadium area, forcing isolated Russian units to withdraw toward the heart of the city. These focused counteroffensive efforts have led to Kyiv reclaiming approximately 23 square kilometers of territory in this sector over recent days, successfully consolidating positions that fully sever Russian ground supply lines into the western portion of Kupiansk.
Despite these successes, the Russian side has also demonstrated operational effectiveness east of the Oskil.
Through a series of rapid assaults, Moscow's forces successfully cleared industrial buildings on the eastern outskirts, pushed through adjacent forested areas, and advanced into houses southwest of Kucherivka, largely capturing the settlement. This action subsequently forced Ukrainian units to withdraw from Sinkivka and nearby areas, officially concluding the nearly 2.5-year battle for that village. Furthermore, RFAF has solidified control over the remaining parts of northern Petropavlovka. This dynamic exchange, 13.23 square kilometers reclaimed by Ukraine versus 9.97 square kilometers gained by Russia, underscores that while Moscow is achieving significant breakthroughs on the Donetsk and Zaporizhia fronts, its forces are not uniformly prevailing and remain susceptible to local counterattacks, particularly where Ukrainian forces have access to secure logistical hubs west of the river line. In synthesis, the events of mid-December suggest a critical tipping point in the strategic conflict. While Kyiv demonstrates the tactical capability to execute localized counteroffensives and effectively inflict casualties on Russian forces, as General Syrski stated that despite active recruitment, RAFF cannot increase its numbers due to daily losses. The scale and breadth of the current Russian pressure are proving overwhelming for the established Ukrainian defense lines.
The likely fall of Mirnograd, coupled with the profound breakthrough at Huliaipol and the quiet loss of Seversk, implies that the strategy of maintaining static defense lines across multiple axes is becoming untenable. The primary challenge for Kyiv is no longer preventing tactical advances, but preventing these successful breakthroughs from turning into a rapid strategic collapse that triggers the feared domino effect.
The need for immediate, decisive reserve deployment to stabilize fronts simultaneously under extreme duress while defending against persistent deep strikes against infrastructure, such as the reported attack on the commercial vessel in Odessa and the subsequent blackout, paints a picture of an army stretched to its operational limit.
The current phase of the war is thus defined by an intense race against time. Can Ukrainian forces generate enough localized resistance and utilize deep strike capabilities to degrade the Russian logistical foundation before the accumulating weight of RAFA territorial advances, particularly in Mirnograd and Huliaipol, forces a far more consequential and perhaps irreversible retreat across the Eastern Theater?
The coming weeks will be critical in providing the answer to that question, determining whether the current wave of Russian offensive success translates into true strategic depth or merely exhausts the assaulting units against a resilient, albeit fatigued, defense. The analysis and commentary in this video are based on publicly available sources, military reporting, and represent the channel's own perspective derived from these observations, presented for informational purposes only.